Location's really important in all of your work, I think. Could you tell us a little bit about Romney Marsh and the first film, Laughter Far Away?
Yeah, the first film was the first year film when I moved to France, and I basically, they have a lot of material there. I could use all their cameras and stuff like that. So for my project, I just filled up a van of all their equipment and drove it back to England, which is I'm from the southeast coast of England, and the school is in the north of France. So we just, I filmed it in a sort of in this area called the Romney Marsh, which is in the southeast of Kent. Some people, have heard of Dungeness. Dungeness is like a little desolate wasteland of pebbles with a big nuclear power station there.
Jarman lived, wasn't it?
That's where Derek Jarman lived as well, yeah. I grew up about 3 miles away in a little village called Lydd, and we knew Derek Jarman's house, and we all knew that there was a film director living there, but this was the days before the internet, and it's quite a sort of art avant-garde filmmaker, so obviously we didn't see his films on TV or anything, so we didn't know who he was. But then years later we found out who Derek Jarman was, and obviously I became interested in that. But I grew up very near there, and we shot that first film around there. And it was kind of just basically sort of like a mixture of sort of surreal, dark, kind of dreamy sort of style mixed with a sort of realist kind of British kind of well, it was sort of about growing up in a small town with nothing to do, lots of people just, just hanging out in the pub and getting smashed all the time, and lots of weird characters, and it was like quite, some people move down that way now, and like Folkestone, the town where we lived afterwards, is quite being a bit gentrified now, but where I grew up, at the time I thought, this is like the end of the earth, why have I been born here, this is a terrible place, and so yeah, there was lots of people, it was lots of boredom and alcoholism and drugs and all kinds of weird people doing weird shit, and this is sort of what inspired the film. I wanted to make, trying to capture that in some way, I suppose.
There's like a folklore element to it as well. It's like there's a bit of a kind of, it goes a bit folk horror towards the end. Is that based on local legend or anything like that?
I wanted the main character to have some sort of, he's obviously in quite a bad way, and he's having these strange sort of hallucinations, I suppose. But yeah, he's going on some sort of weird journey in his head, and I wanted there to be some sort of spiritual element in it, but it was obviously tainted by all the alcohol and his weird mind. But yeah, when I moved to France, I went to Toulouse for a month to try and learn French in a month, and that didn't really work. But I was in Toulouse is near a place called Lourdes, which is, if anyone knows, is where they had a famous a miracle, and it's kind of like a Disneyland for Catholics, and lots of Catholics go there and try and have the holy water and stuff like that. But they were playing this this hymn all day, every day in Lourdes, and it was the melody from the song that you hear in the film. It was like, it's called Ave Maria de Lourdes, and it's just like da, 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 and it just goes on and on and on all day. And then I liked that, and I wanted to use that in some way, and then I just basically mixed that melody with the lyrics from John Barleycorn, which is like it's a folk song that's been covered many times. I think Traffic have done a version of it. It's also an old poem where the words originally come from a poem. I think Robert Burns also wrote a poem, using this sort of folklore as well. So I just got those words, the poetry, and mixed it with that melody, and then got this lovely women's choir that was in Folkestone to sing it, and and John Barleycorn, the poem is all about the sort of the barley growing and then them chopping it down to make beer, and so you got to kill John Barleycorn, but then John Barleycorn awakens in the minds of the people who drink the beer, but then it's also kind of means John Barleycorn must die, as in we must kill John Barleycorn, either to get the beer or just stop drinking the beer, or it's sort of you can see it both ways really.
I feel like a lot of your films deal with outsiders, or like a distorted perspective on reality. What is it about those subjects that you find so interesting, and like what draws you to that?
I think when I was younger, it was kind of like watching a lot of films, and I think if you're an artist or if you're doing anything creative, you want to make a contribution in your own way. There's something out there that's not being said or not being shown, and you want to, you know, fill that gap somehow. I've always maybe felt a bit kind of not kind of part of the crowd, I suppose, and I've always liked films that have a very kind of singular perspective, who let their own intuition or creativity guide them wherever it may lead. If you try and second guess what is good, what will people like, or, you know, if you're trying to make it for some imaginary group of people who you don't know, it's always comes across as a bit half-assed, really. So whatever kind of interests me, whatever kind of aesthetic, you know, I find interesting, I just sort of lean into that and see where it goes. When I was in England, I was always sort of interested in a lot of French cinema. I always felt they were doing things that you didn't really see in British cinema. Laughter Far Away, which I filmed back home where I'm from, I showed it to people in England, and they were like, "Wow, you've made this really arty French film. This is really cool." And everyone in France watched it and was like, "That's the most British film I've ever seen."
This is, as I said before, this is part of the PLEASUREDOME, which is something that me and Adam organise. We've been screening things at Blah, doing things, and it's been just an absolute pleasure doing this with you. Hopefully this will go onto our YouTube channel, which is at the PLEASUREDOME. But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming over, and thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.